The Autism Research Institute relies on the generosity of donors like you to make this webcast possible. If you enjoy this presentation, please consider making a donation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm glad to be here and look forward to sharing this information on using the technology that we have available to us now, which has been very helpful in my practice. I know I'm using a lot of apps for speech therapy and just various ways that my clients have used it, not just for entertainment, but for also communication and learning. And we're going to go through some different apps that I use. I've also provided some different links that are available on online that you can go to kind of specify and pick what particular app you might need for either yourself or for your child. I currently work with a lot of kids between the ages of 2 all the way up to about 12, and so I've looked in those various areas. And as you guys know, that as you're going and trying to determine which app to purchase, there's just so many choices out there right now, and daily they're adding so many more. A lot of the different apps are available through either Apple or Android, and that is expanding daily also. As I go and try to figure out where to send my, decide where to download from and get particular skills that I might be working on. And in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about the different characteristics that we see with ASD and what's going to be the best fit for whoever I'm working with. When we look at the reviews, that's one of the things in looking and going through and seeing what different people have used that particular app for. Also, I know I've had the opportunity to download a lot of the light versions just because at that point in time I'm usually trying to figure out what would spark an interest for some of the kids that I work with, and so it gives me lots of opportunities to try different things without investing. The other thing is I know I have some kids that will like something one day and then the next day they have no interest in it, and so that gives me an opportunity to try those different things. One thing that I have done is have been able to take screenshots of the particular apps that I have available, and I'll print that out, and sometimes it will help the kids kind of go through and help pick out the ones that they want, and they can kind of, we've even used it for a way for a kid to go home and tell his parents that that was a particular one that they liked, and using it as a communication tool to share something that they enjoyed. And then also, I've found that there are some companies that have done a very good job of being able to develop great software for communication and also looking at social skills. And in doing that, I've started visiting their website or going to the developers page and looking at what additional apps they're producing at the time. And a lot of those they'll put on YouTube, or they'll have several screenshots that you can go through and kind of look at so you can get more information about the app. I even have some families who have contacted the developers at different times to let them know that, you know, this has been a really good app for them. Here are some skills that we know that our kid needs to work on, and they like the graphics or a particular thing, and contact the developer. So as I go through this, as much as we like the different apps, sometimes our kids will I've had children who have gotten to where they're just stuck on playing it, and they have a hard time giving it up or a hard time sharing. And so there are some new apps that have come out to, you can set it up on your iPad or your Android, and what you can do is be able to enable, this is the amount of time we're going to do this, and then we need to, be done with it so that they can have an opportunity to do a lot of other things. I know in my practice I've had some kids who've actually become aggressive because they wanted to just use the iPad and that's it. And so what we've done is take that as an opportunity to use it for, while I'm waiting for the iPad, I can do this, this, and this, because sometimes they get so engrossed in it that they're not sure, they forget about other things they can do, or they need to be taught that here are some other things I can do while I'm waiting. And it's provided an opportunity for me to work on sharing and taking turns. I usually, of course, keep my turn very short so that they can turn around and get it reinforced for asking for their turn and various things. So there's lots of ways to incorporate just with using the app, but also to work in communication skills, waiting skills, what do I do when I'm waiting, and how do I ask for a turn, or how do I ask for this particular thing that I'm very interested in. So it gives a lot of opportunity also for just, in general, working on communication skills. This is just an example for limiting screen time. I've listed about 4 different ones that have been out there, and what it does is it gives you your alert that this is how much time's left, or we're done with this. And so it's one of those things that you can even build into a schedule. The one thing that I have found to be a little bit challenging is the fact that there are often tools that I need on the iPad when you're in a game that might be used for a schedule. So sometimes helping figure out how to toggle back and forth between those two things. I'm also going to go through some apps that I have found helpful and kind of let you know some of the reasons that I chose these. When you're looking at listening comprehension, we know that the visual a lot of times will help our kids as they're working on those visual skills in the listening. In this particular app, what they do is they'll look at, they are putting on glasses, and they get the visual representation of the words, but then they have to go and look at the choice of pictures of they are putting on glasses and look at how those words come together to derive a different meaning. And so what the student would do is they would go ahead and choose that picture, and they would picture the sentence. So it's a matter of picturing the words and picturing those particular icons, and then being able to bring the language together and understand the meaning behind what's being said. The nice thing about a lot of these apps is you have the settings that you can go in, and you can set it up according to what your child's needs are and be able to adjust those as you see growth. One of the things that we do in our practice at times is there is one part of it where it will use a clock and a sand timer, and between the time it goes from those 3 pictures or however many you decide need to be within the sentence over to your choices. And what we've done is a lot of times kids who have trouble with the auditory processing, they might have challenges when you ask them to repeat the sentence while the sand timer is disappearing, while the sand's disappearing. So they may have trouble telling you what the sentence was that they just heard. And as a therapist, that helps me understand how well the auditory processing is working for them. And it gives me additional things to think of what skill can I work on to help them improve. So it's one way that you can look and do that. And the other thing is many of these will keep track of their success. And so sometimes when they're having an opportunity to work on it and you can't be right there, you can still kind of see how they're doing and see if there's a particular skill that it seems like they're having difficulty with. So that is that particular company actually has several apps that have been very helpful. The other thing is just looking at some language apps. And the video touch apps by Sound Touch have been great for a lot of kids who like vehicles or they like animals and different things. But what it does is it will show a cartoon drawing or animated drawing, and when you click on that, it's not showing that one, but the video. And when it brings up the video clip, it will show, for instance, this elephant. It will show the elephant out in the wild and doing different things. And then when you go to click on it again, it's a different picture of different elephants, and it may be a herd of elephants or it might just be one elephant. What it does from a communication perspective, I know that, listening to individuals on the spectrum discuss that sometimes when they have an idea of an elephant, they have this one example. And when they have that one example, then sometimes they have trouble expanding that idea. I know in listening to previous presentations, even by Temple Grandin, when she talks about a dog, she said, when you think about a dog, you're comparing a Chihuahua to a Great Dane. And while they're very different, they're still dogs. And so I like the app in the fact that it gives a variation so that you can expand some of the concepts for that particular vocabulary. And the kids also enjoy the videos, and it's been an opportunity to also work on verbs so we can talk about what they're doing and a way to expand some speech and language. Also, First Phrases is another one that I've enjoyed, and it's, again, by the same company that did the listening comprehension. What you do is you have the visual representation for, go on the monkey bars. In the next one, it shows the little mouse going across the monkey bars. Then it provides you an opportunity. You would touch on the picture, and so, for instance, the go on actually was a different color block. When I touch the block, go on turns around and reveals that icon so that the kids can start recording. It supports literacy skills. It supports really attending to what you're saying and providing some basically cognitive understanding of the language. So they would say go on, and then also a lot of our kids will drop out some of the articles in language, and so it gives an opportunity to realize that that word still belongs in the sentence, because sometimes we would have kids just say go on monkey bars. So it's a way to add that in visually. And then what the children would do is they would go ahead and record that, go on and then they would touch the yellow box, and it would say monkey bars. So then after it's recorded, you can push play. And when you push play, then the video clip will show up of the mouse going across the monkey bars again. So it adds lots of elements for language. And again, this is another one of those things that you can go in and you can decide what type of settings they need, how much assistance do they need, when are they ready to move on to the next level. And again, it will record the information so you can kind of keep track of it if you're keeping some data. Another one, some of our kids that have difficulty with inferencing or some figurative language and some of the higher level questionings for why and which and how, and also predicting based on the language. This is a particular app that was developed by Smarty Ears, and they have several. It's a speech-language pathologist, I believe, that develops these. And so it's an opportunity to kind of give it a fun way to work on those particular skills that are a little bit more challenging. For instance, if you were to go to the land of inferencing and you pick that particular one for your avatar to go to, you would be presented with the box. In this box, a storm was coming and Dad was opening all the drawers looking for something. If the storm hits, we could lose electricity, Dad said. What was he looking for? So we're inferencing that there's a problem without directly saying, go look for a flashlight or go look for candles. And so it's a way to look at not only teaching, but also even assessing how our kids are understanding language so that we can specifically target those skills. So some of the options on this are they can either read for themselves or they can touch the picture and it will read for them, and then it can also read the options. So it's kind of a fun one to work on some higher level skills. The other thing is it gives you an opportunity to get some feedback. So if your child is playing with it individually, you might at different times go and look and see how they're doing. You know, are they just hitting buttons and moving through it, or are they really processing the information? And so it's a way for you to get some feedback. And sometimes I know for some of the kids I work with the supports that come with the app, and they help direct them along so that they help them have success without us being right behind them and sometimes talking while they're trying to work. You know, some of our kids need that just one instruction at a time. They need not to be getting information from several different sides so that they can process more easily. So it's a way to sometimes help them continue to work on skills, and then you can give them some individual time to do some things independently. The other piece to that is if you start seeing, you know, the figurative language and looking at they've learned this particular phrase, you know, when somebody says, you know, it's raining cats and dogs, they may have seen it on the screen, but one of the important things when you're using any of these apps is look at what skills they're learning and then look at how can I incorporate that into our daily lives so that we can apply what they've learned. So again, I know that sometimes we get short on time, and I just wanted to point out and add some additional language apps in here. These are just some additional fun ones. I know my girls have really enjoyed the Dr. Panda and Toca Boca apps. The Dr. Panda apps I'm using a lot right now in therapy because it gives you opportunities to grow a garden. Some of the crops need rain. Some of them need a water can to take care of them. Some of them need a water hose to take care of them. And so it goes along with you get a complete growing a vegetable or growing a fruit and showing how you take care of these different things. Shopping at a supermarket, the fact that you sometimes have to make sure that you put the shopping cart back with the other shopping carts. You might have to weigh your food. You have to scan it. So there's lots of different things that we actually do in real-life experiences. So it gives them a chance to practice some of those things and then, you know, carry it over to, well, you know, at Dr. Panda, remember he was having to scan all of his food before he left, so we need to scan this item before. Sometimes it gives them a reference point to remember that's what we did, so now we're going to go do it at the supermarket. So those are just some additional language ones. And then another one I've been very pleased with this particular app. It's called the Social. Based on a lot of the principles that I've learned from Michelle Garcia Winters, although this is not her particular, learn social cognition and understanding the why behind what we do and why we use certain social skills. And so this is a really great animation, great opportunity to specifically learn different things about, you know, if we want to figure out what somebody's thinking about, they're usually looking at what they're thinking about. And so the kids in this particular game will work on, you know, paying attention to the characters and looking at what they're looking at, and then they have to go and touch what that person's looking at so that you can see what they might be thinking about. It also goes into several different skills. I would encourage you to go to that particular link that I have posted on that on my slide so that you can go through and it kind of walks you through the various social skills. The other thing that's kind of nice about it is it gives you an opportunity to make sure that you've established a social skill before you start moving on and jumping around in the app. So it gives you an opportunity to look and say, okay, this is what we're working on. The other thing it does provide is it provides you with lessons and activities of ways that you can generalize the social skills that that particular lesson's been working on. And so it's a nice way for kids to process it in a different way without actually being in the social experience as they're learning, but it's just another way to provide that visually. The other thing that they have put out is the digital problem solver. And again, I put a YouTube link to that so that you can go online and look at it and determine if that's, you know, an appropriate app for your child or for yourself at that point in time. But the digital problem solver will go through and you look at emotions of that person and determine how they're feeling, and then you go into figuring out how to solve the problem. So if you're mad, it goes into a little video of thinking about, you know, what should you do in that situation. And so it gives them something to reflect back on. The other thing you can do with this particular app is you can go in and take a picture. So you could take a picture of, I could take a picture of my daughter when she's excited or when she's frustrated, and we could add it to the digital problem solver so we could make it personal for us and determine, you know, if this were the case, what could I do instead? And sometimes after kids have learned, you know, we should check the digital problem solver. So sometimes before you might have a behavior related to the emotion, it gives you a way to turn around and say, oh, you're starting to get mad. Let's think about the digital problem solver. What should we do? And sometimes even redirecting over to that so that you can start building skills of, I know what to do in this situation. I know with a lot of kids we work on learning these skills and, you know, learning them when they're calm. And sometimes, you know, making sure that when they start to get in that mode, sometimes they don't recognize it within themselves. And so we're that outside person sometimes helping them realize that, you know, you're starting to get mad or you look really excited about this, or, you know, and then helping them figure out this is when you would insert this skill. This is when you get to do what we have been working on. And so, you know, it gives you an opportunity that you've been able to look at that, they've been able to play with it, they've been able to experience it, and then we get to support them in using those skills elsewhere. Another one that I've been using that I've really liked is with the social language skills is Between the Lines. And I'm very excited that there are so many more supports and apps and various things that people are really understanding that we need to use in order to help develop social language skills. And you know, this particular app, they have Between the Lines 1, Between the Lines 2, and Between the Lines Advanced. And it basically is that idea of being able to read between the lines, taking in the intonation of a person, their facial expressions, the perspective taking of others, what kind of body language are you seeing, if that is a, you know, what kind of slang phrase somebody's using. And so it gives them an opportunity to, you know, for example, this one, as you can see at the top, is looking at the body language of this person. And so incorporated into this app are several video clips. If you have a child who isn't reading yet, you can click on the little speaker and it will tell you what your different options are. But based on the video clip, and it goes into what is she thinking, then you can go down and choose what she was thinking and see if you're right or wrong. So again, it gives you an opportunity to try to practice. Let me see. We also have, you know, what does that mean? And looking at expression scores, looking at listening scores. This particular slide is showing, before it shows the two pictures, it will just give you the ear, and then you'll get to hear the sounds of what someone's saying. And when you do that, you're just hearing it. You're not looking at any video. So you just have to pay attention to the tone of voice and various pitches and things like that. And then based on that, then it provides the picture, and they have to choose that. Okay, also, I've had some different parents at different times ask me about reading comprehension, that a lot of times their kids might be great readers, but they might have trouble with the comprehension piece of it. And this particular app was developed by, let me see, I think Smarty Ears, I believe. I'll have to double check that. Yes, Smarty Ears app. And it's Reading Comprehension Camp, where you can go and choose various levels. It gives you the pictures that you can use. It can read to the child if you need it to, or the child can read it and record themselves and play it back. Or as a parent, you might, the child might prefer your voice. And so it would give you an opportunity to record it, and then they could play it. And so you can change up the settings on this. It gives you the visual that you can go back and refer to for some of the comprehension questions. And let me see if my slide's going to... There we go. Sorry, my technical problems on my end. So, for instance, it provides the picture still there. It gives them short phrases. It gives them, who is Crystal and your choices. And if they need a hint, they can choose the hint or check it off. And so sometimes this, depending on your child, they could work on it by themselves. They could work on it with you. It does have the speaking ability to be able to read to the child. Just to let you know, here are some of the things that they look at within the quizzes. And you can specify if you're just working on who questions, if you're just working on cause and effect, comparing and contrasting, and you can choose those particular skills that you want to target at the time, and then it provides you feedback on how your child's doing. As I know that a lot of kids have trouble with the reading and writing, depending on their level, and I just went ahead and added these particular links so that you can go in and look and see, based on what your need is, you can go and look at some of the opportunities. The other thing is several of these will update frequently, which is a great thing because these are just constantly changing and improving. The other thing that my daughters have a challenge in reading, and so we've been looking at apps for recording and dictation. What I have found, these are a couple, the Clear Record Premium, which it does a little better with some of the background noise, and so that can get a little tricky. So sometimes that is one thing that I've noticed I've had to go and look at whenever I'm trying to compare. Sometimes with speech clarity, you just want to find something that is the best speech clarity that you can get, because if you have background noise, or if your child has a little bit of trouble with volume control and things like that. The nice thing about it is I've actually used this in speech for kids who are really working on clearing up their speech or talking slower, because if it's listening to what they're saying and they aren't being clear and enunciating, then sometimes it helps them pay more attention to their speech. Now, I wouldn't use this for a child who is having a lot of trouble with speech, because it's going to be frustrating for them. Because I know even with people who speak very clearly that you can still get things back that you are unclear how it heard that. So anyway, think about, the goal is for it to support them and not frustrate them. But the one thing that's been helpful for us is we could put something in like find out what time a movie starts, and we could record it, and then iVoice, which I don't have listed on here. iVoice is the recent one that we have just added to our iPad, and I'm able to say what I need to say, and to the right at the top of the app, I can decide whether I want to Google search what I've just talked about, or if I want to add it to my Facebook, or if I want to email it. And so thinking about gaining, both of my daughters have delays, and I'm trying to think about how to gain some independence for them. And so the goal would be for them to be able to record something, especially if it's something that they really want, that they often are asking for, in a way for them to learn how to message me, so to record what they want, so they can get the message. And so those, I'm trying to think of some practical ways that we can use that to help them become more independent. The other thing I have is I was looking at visual organizers, because we know that the visual component can be so strong for a lot of our kids. And when we look at Poplet was one, and then I also added another link that gives you a lot of various visual organizers. When you look at the Poplet, let me look. For instance, this particular one, to do facts about the Earth, you can go and just draw a square, and you can either insert a picture or you can insert text. And then after you finish that box, you can literally just take your finger and draw it to the side, those lines that you see extending from it. You can create another box. And so from a communication perspective, from a language perspective, I'm looking at, how can I expand that so that it becomes visual information instead of just auditory. It has some that you can actually do it from left to right, and you can look at making a timeline if you want. There's just a number of ways that you can put those together. It looks like I have some more some questions coming up, and I'm going to go ahead and save the questions to the very end and finish up through the presentation, if that's okay. I know that as an audience, you guys, there's so many different needs that you guys might be experiencing for your own particular situation. And so I'm hoping to hit on a range of those depending on what your need is. I know several of you might be working on toileting right now, and this particular app is free, I believe, that it was based on a grant. And Sandbox Learning is the particular one that has put this out. In doing that, they also have a lot of tools that I've used for even social skills and things like that with social stories. But when you look at the I Can Toilet program, it gives you an opportunity for the kids to say, I need to use the bathroom or I had an accident. Well, this gives you an opportunity to go through and figure out what needs to happen next, without it being punitive as they go through that learning process. The other thing is, at the bottom you see create and edit schedule. You can set it up for reminders every 30 minutes, every hour, however much time you need to help them remember to go to the bathroom. And so it's a way to incorporate a timer along with the iPad. And when you look at the I need to use the bathroom, when they use the I need to use the bathroom, they go and then they have some choices. They can listen to a book that they touch on the iPad, or they can use a game where they get to watch a train, or they get to pop bubbles, and then there's reinforcers after it. So this is one, if you go to the I Can Toilet program, if you go to the YouTube link at the bottom of that particular slide that's in front of you, it will go through and give you more of an explanation specifically if that is something you're working on. The other app that I have found that I'm enjoying for some of my kids, especially figuring out, what's the weather going to be, what's the appropriate clothing based on the weather. You can go in and you can choose your zip code, and it will give you the current weather for your zip code. And in doing that, you can determine, what does the weather look like? What is she going to be wearing? Here we see for this particular one, it was 35 degrees. What you can do is take this thermometer and you can move that up and down. And as you move it up and down, if I moved it up higher where it was hotter, her outfit would change. And you would see that it would not be a good idea to wear, your heavy coat and things like that. So it gives a visual for the kids to be able to look and say, okay, this is what the weather's like today. Here's the temperature, and based on that, what kind of clothing would I be wearing? So it puts it in a very practical sense. And again, looking at creating more independent skills and understanding you know, how you would get dressed for certain weather conditions. Let me see. The other thing, when you look at the weather, we know that you can get, they have different opportunities to play some games. You know, when you look at Fahrenheit, how would you change that to Celsius? Going into expressions and idioms related to the weather. So you have some trivia in there. It looks like one of my slides did not pop up. The other thing is graphs. It gives you an opportunity. You can click on the graph. And when you click on the graph, it will provide you an opportunity to put in the weather for that day. And so you can look at how many hot days there were. So you can even work on into math, paying attention to the weather. We know that there are just so many different apps out there, and what I've provided at the end are several websites that you can go to that provide an update of very common apps. The Common Sense Media app reviews, it is focused more on things that are more appropriate for kids based on their age. And so bridging the apps kind of comes from bridging the gap. So ways that you can add technology in for that particular need to, again, gain additional skills. So I think it's important, you know, technology has improved and made things so much easier. I know I've, you know, in years past have been cutting out lots of pictures for kids to use for communication, and now there is actually a previous presentation I've done that I believe is available in a webinar that looks at those more specific apps for communication depending on your child's age and their need. And I would also always encourage you to go back and talk to the professional that you're working with and looking at, you know, to help specify taking this general knowledge and being able to tailor it to the needs of your child and based on their cognitive ability, based on their interests, based on their accessibility. Because as you look at those various things and trying to decide that for your child, you're trying to determine, you know, what is going to provide success for them so that they can enjoy the opportunity to use these type of resources, but without frustrating them. The other thing that I also want to add in here is when you are looking at using it as a communication tool, and there are several different communication apps. One thing I know, if you are using an iPad, you can go to the App Store. You can go under Education and scroll all the way to the bottom. When you scroll to the bottom, it will even have a special needs section, and when you get to the special needs section, it can be broken up into communication and reading and things like that. So it gives you an opportunity to look at those more specifically, and then, you know, go back and visit that often because those change. But there are some communication apps that are available there. When you think about communication, it's really important for the user to understand that there needs to be a listener on the other side of that communication. So no matter what, whether a device, whether it be sign language, whether it be pictures, really helping them understand that if I need something, then I need to have somebody on the receiving end to understand my message. And so that's something you have to be careful with the technology, is sometimes our kids will push the buttons and will respond very quickly, which is great, but helping them realize that they need to bring that information to someone to receive it so that their communication can be heard. So sometimes, you know, and helping them understand that difference, that sometimes we might be doing something to learn, but when you get to the point where you need something or you want to comment on something or show you something, then you need that communication partner. So let me see, we also have, I'm looking at our question here, when regards to some of the Dr. Pandas apps, talking about how I use them more specifically in the app. There are different ways that I've used it depending on the student that I'm working with, and I'm going to go back to that app. Let me get it, if it will move for me. There we go. Have a little bit of a delay going on. With the Dr. Panda apps, I don't have that particular picture up here. But what I have done is we will talk about, when the little bubbles will appear above the character's head of what they've come to, let's say, for the gardening one. When they come to the garden, I often will talk to the kids about, oh, they have a thinking bubble. They're thinking about something that they want. What are they thinking about? So that we can put it back to the character. This is why the character's shown up. This is what they want. And then they go and they will choose that. We also, vocabulary-wise, as far as, labeling, determining is it a fruit, is it a vegetable. Also, whenever we go and we have rain, we have to determine if it's a crop, how are you going to take care of it, how are you going to water it. For the corn or for the wheat, you have to have rain because we can't use a water hose for that because it's too, we can't get enough water. Would we use a water hose inside whenever we're growing the raspberries that are in a plant that we usually use a water can for? So thinking and processing through, what would we need for that? Why would we need it? Also, sometimes the bugs are getting on the plants, and we have to get rid of the bugs. So it gives you an opportunity to talk about, you could even expand that. For some of my higher level kids, we might talk about the bugs that we've seen and what kind of bugs were causing, would eat the leaves, what would they do to the plant. So you can do some kind of predicting with that. For some of my younger kids who just love the fact that they get to have some power over making things happen on the screen, we're working on putting, there's one particular one where you have to put the snail in the jar. And if you don't put it in the jar and you just tap it and it goes away, then the snail will come back. And so, for that particular child, we really worked on understanding in. You have to put it in the jar. And so he had to really pay attention to that concept of in. Otherwise, the snails would just keep coming back. So there's just various things that you look at, some of just the language opportunities, and then you might even roll that on into what you might be planting, or if you go shopping, you can talk about, if we're buying corn, you can talk about, did they grow that in the house at Dr. Panda's, or did they grow it out in the field, and ways to bring it back to events that are happening. So I'm hoping that answers the question on that. The weather app, when we look at that, that particular one, let me grab the name for that on mine. We have that particular one. I will have to get back to you because I think I just erased it to add additional apps to my iPad. So I will get that one for you. And if you even just Google search weather apps for kids, and I've done that at different times too, where I'll think of a particular skill I want to work on and just do a Google search for, what particular skill I need to work on. And then a lot of times it will bring up several different ones. So I will look at the weather app again. Some of these are for the iPad, and then some of them are also for Android use. And so what I end up doing in that is if I've seen something that I've liked that maybe only iPad had, that I've only seen with the Apple, then I'll go in and Google search and ask if it's for the Android, or you can go to the Android store and be able to look at those. And then sometimes even contacting the developer and saying, is this going to be made available, so you can kind of get an idea of what's available for them. Again, if it's not available for that particular system that you're using, think about the concepts that you're learning or that they're enjoying with it, and look and see, Google search that and see if there's additional apps out there that might be comparable. I have to say, on a lot of these apps that I've found, I've had a lot of luck finding them either through Google searches. Someone's asked, how did you find all of these? Either doing a Google search or through friends. I know that a lot of times if I find a particular developer that's done, some of the speech apps that I have that I love, what I've done is I've also gone on Facebook and I've liked their page. And so a lot of times as new stuff comes up, then it will show up on my news feed. The other thing I've done is, and I don't have this on this particular site, so you'll have to write it down, but there is an app called Apps Gone Free, and it's just, Apps Gone Free. You go and look it up, and it daily will send me an update to tell me what particular apps are free for that day. So Apps Gone Free is the name of that one. I'm going to try to type that in and see if it goes to all of you. And then, sorry, I'm going to make sure I read these questions to you guys as I answer them. I'm reading them on my screen here. One of the questions I'm seeing here is for kids who have echolalia and they're repeating a lot of things, especially things that using it, let me see, let me read this directly to you guys, but suggestions for you still using the technology that does not reinforce her repeating stuff that she hears. And sometimes I look and see, is it a way that she's processing information that, or is it a way that she's using it to maybe even communicate? So for instance, if she repeats something, is that her trying to let you know that she might want that particular app, or is she just using that particular phrase? And so some of the things that I will do is turn it around into questions, or I will start trying to expand some other things that she could say that we could use for communication purposes in other settings. The other thing is I've even had kids who will start using the questions that with the echolalia in order to engage or start interactions. So often we're asking our kids, what's that? What's that? As they're developing language, and they turn around and they start asking the same question back to us because that's some of the ways that they've learned with communication. So there's various reasons, and I look at it differently. I try to, determine what is the purpose behind it and look at ways that if she's learning language from the technology in that way, then how can I incorporate other ways to teach her other things that she needs to know using that. Also, let's see, when we look at the other questions, sorry about that, guys. As I finish those, as I finish my slides and go to additional questions, let me look here. I'm going to put up the app review website.
And Tracy, be sure to scroll up. You might have some questions you haven't seen yet that are above. I'm not sure if you saw them all.
Okay. Let me see. On to another question. Most of the conference here I've geared towards language and communication technology because that's what I've been using a lot of it for, just particularly since that is one of the core characteristics with ASD. And some of looking at, is it geared towards younger kids? A lot of the apps have been geared towards some of the younger kids, but there are a lot of the particular apps that I'll use that I can use with older kids for various reasons. When you start looking at the voice technology, the ways you can expand that, I know we have one young man in our office that we're using that to start messaging parents, and so working back and forth whether there are some apps available for texting. And so this particular young man, he's using his communication, he's using an iPad for him. He's using it and using a messaging tool so that he can start messaging his parents and asking things back and forth, a way to expand the use of the technology for communication. And so I often just think about, you know, when you're trying to think about some of the technology that you need, you know, what are you doing for your child or your teenager or things like that, that you think, I wish they could do this, and you think about, okay, what skills would they need, what tools would they need as far as for communication purposes or to complete an academic activity. You know, when you look at the visual organizers, those are geared towards some of your older kids. If they're doing a school project and they need to come up with a timeline for activities that happened in history, ways that you can use that and Google search it and provide facts. I know a lot of our older kids, sometimes when they're working on projects, it's a good opportunity for them to provide the facts, but sometimes they get caught up in all of the information and they have trouble coming up with just the key parts. So when you're using that visual organizer, you can look and say, okay, we have this much information. How can we summarize this information? Let me go, you know, how can we summarize it so it fits in this space to tell what we need to tell about that particular event? So
Traci,
as I look at this, yes.
I've got a question here that was sent to me.
Okay.
Are you still in the middle of that one? Sorry.
That's okay. I'm just looking here. I was just going to pull back up that Poplet and that visual organizer.
Sure. Go ahead. Just let me know when you're ready.
Okay. Let me see. So, you know, when you've got these small areas, it helps them consolidate some of the information, of which sometimes they have trouble picking out what's important and what do we need to know. So it's just another way to look at that. Okay, what was the other question that you had, Denise?
Yes, it's right here. I got this one via email. It says, do you have a particular favorite for a language application for a child who is completely nonverbal?
Okay, one of the things, depending on their developmental level, as far as language goes, if you're using it for communication purposes, I've had some kids who have done well with My First AAC because it's not overwhelming and it goes along with more of a developmental approach for asking for things. Again, this is for much younger kids. I can actually bring it down to where I just have two options in front of them as far as the icons go for communicating. As far as language goes, and if you're working on vocabulary, I like the sound touch because it gives an opportunity to look at the vocabulary. For instance, if you're working on vehicles, it gives you lots of different vehicles. It gives you lots of opportunities to see what different ones look like, but they're all, you know, all these dogs are dogs, even though they look so different. You know, all these cats are cats, even though they look differently, they still have some common characteristics. And so I use that a lot for just, you know, giving a fun way to increase vocabulary. Another one that I think I've had on a previous presentation is Alpha Tots, and it's A-L. If I type, Denise, if I type in this box, will it go out to everybody?
No, it might be good just to read it so people can get it. That way also people on YouTube can get it.
Okay, great. Alpha Tots is another one that is helpful, especially when you're looking at doing alphabet. We have a tendency to just use nouns, and that particular one goes into verbs. So if you get, you know, for instance, the letter O is for opening doors. And so instead of just labeling something and using nouns, you get an opportunity to expand, especially if you have kids who really like the letters. So Alpha Talks is a great app that I really, I use it a lot. In looking at some of these other questions, I hope I'm getting all of these. For
Sure. So if you could read the question and then answer it, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Okay. The question I have in front of me here is: are there any good apps targeting articulation or apraxia? There are some new apps that have recently come out. I know for articulation, I use ArticPix a lot, and it's ARTIKPIX. That has been geared more towards speech pathologists, so you might talk to your speech pathologist and look at what are they targeting right now, because I think that's important to look and see, you know, what are you targeting right now and how can I reinforce what you're targeting, because sometimes our kids will get overloaded if we decide to start working on other things and we're working on several different things at a time. So I'd always go back to your speech pathologist to talk about some of the things there. There are some new apraxia apps that have come out that I personally have not used at this time, and I've been looking at those. Most of those apps are more specialized or a little bit more pricey. I think I would continue to look at reviews and talk with your speech pathologist so you can determine what is needed. The other thing is I have used, it is through Lingua Graphic, and it's LINGRAPHICA, and it's a program that they use a lot with individuals with apraxia or aphasia, but they have one particular one for phonemes, and I've had some kids, it just shows the mouth producing the sound. And so it's close-up video clips of the mouth. And I've had some kids that might attend to the video before they would attend to me. And they were imitating things off of the video. And so when I was able to put that on for like the P sound, you know, you see just the mouth going puh, puh. And so a lot of times the kids would go ahead and give it a try. So it's just another avenue you might use, and it's a relatively inexpensive app. Okay, looking at the next question, do you know about Spanish apps? I have not used a lot of apps, but I know in Spanish that I've seen a lot that some of the apps you can go in and you can change the language of the app. And so when you find an app that you like, again, I would go back, Google search it, and put in, you know, is Spanish included, or look at the description within the Google Store or the App Store where you can go and determine, you know, what languages is it available for. There are a lot of apps that you can go in and change it in the settings and make it a particular language. And I think I answered, how do I find such amazing apps? Like I said, again, just sharing with other people, going and finding those particular websites that I put on the last slide and looking at those often, you can find a lot of information. As I scroll down through some of the questions, do you have a list of apps for the young kids related to social skills and language? There are so many for emerging readers and writers, but there's such a need for the youngest ASD students. Yes, that's, some of those, you know, even looking at some of the social skills and language, when you're looking at just some interaction, and I know with my very young kids, I've used the My First AAC a lot because there are some apps on there for saying hi, saying bye, I like this, I don't like this. And that one, I will have to tell you the name of the company because they actually have produced a couple of apps that I've used frequently. The My First AAC, I've used it partially because it's a more inexpensive app for the younger kids, and it's been helpful for several. But the company that puts it together is called INI. Let me get here. JINI. Again, that's INJINI. And that particular company has done the My First AAC. Again, if you're interested in getting more information on it, I would either Google it or even look at YouTube, because many times you'll find a video that shows it more in depth. But that particular one, just for emerging, and again, looking at when you really getting that interaction back and forth, and taking an opportunity whenever playing with the iPad. They're making sure that you're interacting with them, and that interaction alone is great for developing social skills, where they might show you something on the iPad and you comment on it, and so you just within using it with them, you can really build a lot of skills for some give and take within an interaction. Hopefully that will help on that particular question. And the next question is, our program has students transitioning from high school to the work world, and we currently use social apps as SOSH. Do you have any others in mind that would benefit this age group? I don't at this time, but I think there's a lot of activities, there's a lot of apps that are available for even looking at productivity. And when you go into the app stores and look at some of the, I look at some of these things for connecting to looking at the work world, and I think about, what skills do they need? Are they on time? Do they need reminders for when they need to do certain things within a work world? And even at looking at some of those apps that have various timers with a schedule, so that they can become more independent in being able to get to their next either job or their next, figuring out even a schedule of what all things that you're required to do at your job, so that they can become more independent of checking that off, even thinking of how we might use visual schedules for younger people. So I know that between that and, if you have, somebody who is interested in asking lots of questions, or, we have some of our kids who they just constantly ask you questions about everything, and sometimes putting a visual support in place that you can even, do an album. There are various picture album apps where you might take pictures of all the things that they're going to be doing at work, and being able to support that with the instructions, with the visuals of completing a task or completing a job, or even, if I'm stuck, who would you ask? Taking a picture of that person to help them remember if you're having trouble, here's who you need to contact. So it's thinking about a way and, keeping it all together within the technology, so that they're not carrying around several different things that they have to physically manipulate. Let's see. Talking about, for my clients that are 2 to 5 years old, is the next question, and asking what my favorite apps are. I have several kids. The Sound Touch app, again, that is one of my absolute favorites, because now that they've added the video to it, and now that one is called Video Touch. The Video Touch the kids love, because, if they click on the helicopter picture, again, it's the animated picture, a video pops up of like various helicopters doing different things. So there's a little video that they can watch of a helicopter going in over water and getting a bucket of water that they'll go use for a fire. For the fire trucks, when they click on the fire truck, it shows a fire truck arriving at the scene of a fire. So it gives you an opportunity to look at some real life experiences, and to talk about what that person actually does. and gives you the visual to support it. So I think that one's helpful for language. The other one, which I did not have on there that I will tell you, is My Playhome. And I've had lots of kids who have enjoyed that one. If you'll just look at My Playhome, they can activate different things within the house. And so the kids might need to pour cereal, and so you have to get cereal out of the cabinet and put it in the bowl, and then the child eats. There are a couple of things that, you know, they can go outside and they can play, and you can change up who's going to be there. You can put different characters within the scene, and that one's doing well. Going back to the question about the weather app, that particular app is called Kid Weather. So those of you asking about the weather app, it's called Kid Weather. Also for my younger kids, again, all of the Dr. Panda apps have been a lot of fun, and it's provided a lot of language opportunities for that. I'd also, looking at our next question, I've had a question regarding even for some of our older kids who might be working on projects and things like that. There's particular productivity. If you look in the section of productivity, Keynote is one particular one where they can make their own presentation, PowerPoint presentation. So they could add in pictures that they might Google and things like that and present their own. So there's just, you know, bottom line, as you think about the older students, you just think about if we could increase independence, you know, is there supports that we can put in place that can help them become more independent? Let's say that they, you know, might need reminders on what questions to ask or things they need to tell someone, and you might have to incorporate a timer so that they know when is the appropriate time to talk about that. You know, it's not appropriate to talk about it until break time, and so you might put on there a timer with a note. I know recently, and I haven't had an opportunity to work with it much, I just downloaded it, but it's called Awesome Calendar. And thinking about some of your older students, the Awesome Calendar, you can go in and you can add, let me pull it up, you can add in a to-do list, you can add in notes, you can add in pictures, and again, that one's called the Awesome Calendar. And so I'm still in the process of learning it because I've just changed over, but it also has the weather on it, so you can look and see what the weather is. And so it's kind of a one-stop for all of that. You can also, depending on, you know, if you live in the United States, you can choose United States. You can choose certain holidays based on the area that you live in. You can also use it to invite other people to things. If you have an event, you can use it for other people who are using that particular software. So it could be that, you know, you set up the calendar and they can pull it up and they can pay attention to, here's my to-do list for this particular day, notes to be sure and ask somebody a question. So, you know, think about all the things that you're doing for them and think about if they were going to be independent in doing this, what could I put in place so that I'm not the person reminding them all the time and they can rely on some of the technology to do that and gain some independence. And then some of those have a checklist, like the to-do list, it has a check. So you can go in and check those off and, you know, be able to, you know, teaching kids to copy and paste. Maybe they can copy and paste the to-do list and send you a message so that you know what will happen. Okay, the website. I'm looking at the website again. I'm looking to see which one.
So what's the question, Tracy?
Looking at ways to get apps cheaper was one of the questions. How do you do that? apps gone free. I've received several of those where I've just went ahead and picked up the app. The nice thing about that is you get to do a trial run and decide whether you want to keep it or let it go. But even finding those particular apps, I did a Google search and put apps for free apps, and in doing that, there were a few different apps that were available to update you. But so far, I've had the most success with apps gone free. The other thing in getting apps cheaper is if you have a particular company that is developing them, again, going to like them on Facebook or signing up for email updates. A lot of times when those go on sale, they'll post something on their Facebook or their Twitter account, or they will send you an email and say, heads up, in honor of whatever special occasion, this app is, cheaper. I know during Autism Awareness Month and Autism Awareness Day even, there were several that were free for that particular day. And then also the Speech and Hearing Month, which is in May, some of the communication ones were. And, just sometimes when it's a newer app, they will send it out. I'm looking at another question here. My son's 18, showing interest in reading now at a grade 1 level. What is a good app to improve reading and thus his communication? There are some various, and you have to do a little bit of research with it. I apologize not knowing it off the top of my head, but there are some apps that are available that will read content to you. So let's say, depending on what his interests were, you can use the app to read to him, so that I know some of the students that I've worked with, as we're starting to gain some reading skills, making sure that it was something that they were interested in was a big help for that. But also, sometimes any of the apps that would highlight the word as it reads it is often a good way to increase the literacy skills, because you're listening to the word and then you're seeing it highlighted while you're listening to it. And for a lot of our kids that are sight-based readers, and so they just look at the word and they memorize that that's what that word says, versus more of a phonetic approach, that particular resource has been helpful for some of those families. And so the other thing is, there are some apps where you could work on even typing something in. There are apps for reading emails, and I would just recommend whatever app you're using or whatever device that you're using, that you go in and just type it in, that apps to read emails, and just put that in and see what apps come up for you. Looking at ways to, the next question is, please tell me how we can restrict on YouTube videos. Example is video titled Humpty Dumpty and showing something gross or weird. Yes, that is a problem. One of the things, I don't have a good answer for that right now. I know one of the things that I have looked at doing is making sure I set the ratings on my iPad for certain ages. But unfortunately, a lot of that stuff will get through some of even the filters. There was one particular, if you Google search, and going back to, let me go back to this particular slide. When I look at these, thank you for waiting on that. Okay, when we go back to playing it safe, I'm not sure the age of your child, but these two particular links are helpful for doing that. The Kiddos Play Mode Safe for Kids is also one that will only allow certain videos in. So it's another way that you could just get the videos that you kind of want without the exposure to all of the others. So I would go back to the Kid Mode, Playing It Safe, go back to that slide, and look at clicking on some of those things in order to keep them a little bit, restrict the things that you want to restrict. Okay. The other thing is if you're looking at in the iPad, when you go into restrictions and settings, you can go in those restrictions and, again, put that you only want things for a certain age and above. You can also click that you do not want explicit language, and there's various things within your system that you can there's settings within that system that you can adjust. That particular, I have another question here that I'm seeing is for the Alpha game that I was talking about. That Alpha app is called Alpha Tots, and it's ALPHATOTS. And so most of those, when the Alpha Tots, I believe somebody was wondering about the question. Most of the apps that I use are usually under $2, so 99 cents, $1.99, things like that. If I'm going to spend more, I do a little bit more research. I also use those reviews a lot to look and see how other people have rated them to determine if I want to spend that money, because it quickly adds up as you go and do those. The other thing is, I'm being asked, is it is expensive a Proloquo to go? Proloquo is one of the pricier ones, but I know on the My First AAC that I've mentioned before, I believe that one is $29.99. And so, as you know, again, you need to talk to the person who is working with your child, and look at those YouTube videos together to determine what might be a better fit for their communication needs at the time. Because Proloquo is also a very, very good app also, and I have kids who use that also. So you just have to figure out what's going to be the best fit for your child. Let me see. We also have the My First AAC is, someone was asking, could you spell out the two apps you just mentioned for nonverbal kids? And if you're on, not sure, let's see. I'm trying to think about which particular ones those were. My First AAC is just, just capital AAC with no spaces after My First. Also with the Video Touch and Sound Touch, sometimes I've seen that both ways with a space between Video Touch and Sound Touch. If you go back to the slide for language apps, it also, I've provided the link for soundtouchinteractive.com, and you can go and look at some of the different ones that they have available. And that's in the beginning of the slides. There's a question about, are there any apps to encourage 2-year-olds to have eye contact? I've had some. There are a couple of apps out there that are working on looking at eye contact, and the particular apps that they have, for some kids it might be helpful, and other kids I've had that it hasn't helped much. So it just depends on the child. But like, for instance, when they look at the picture of the child, there will be a number that appears in their eyes, and you have to go and find the number. For instance, you might have a choice of 3 different numbers, and you have to choose the number that you saw in the child's eyes. So you'll be looking at the eyes, and all of a sudden you see like a number 2 appear in their eyes, and then you have to go and choose number 2. The other thing that I have done is also in playing with them with the iPad to increase eye contact, where you play a game. of if they wanted the iPad, a lot of times they'll start to look at you, and as soon as they look at me, then I hand them the iPad. The other thing is, if you, there's a webinar that I had presented previously on technology, and I provide in there a PowerPoint that I've done to help kids learn to answer questions. And once they knew what the questions were, or the answers were to the questions, then I was able to get increased eye contact for the interaction of things like, you know, what's your name, where do you live, what's your mom's name, and things like that. And those particular slides are in the previous presentation. So at this time, I think we're out of time, and I hope I've answered a lot of your questions. I appreciate you guys, your time today, and I'm hoping that this will be helpful information to help you and your kids, and something they'll enjoy that will help them improve communication and interaction. I just want to encourage you to take those skills that they've learned and look at ways that you can point it out within your everyday environment so that you can expand that knowledge to other places and increase generalization. Thank you again for your time, and you guys have a good day.